You drove past a semi-truck today. You glanced at the driver alone behind the wheel, and you assumed, like everyone does, that truck drivers are paid for their time. By the hour. By the load. Something that resembles fair. You couldn't be more wrong. They are paid by the mile. A system designed in the 1930s that has never been reformed, and your dinner plate is the evidence. Before this per-mile rule became a trap, trucking was a local game. Drivers were paid by the hour or the day. They knew their routes. They knew their cargo. Trucking was a respected, localized trade, not a frantic race against a clock. A driver's time had absolute, guaranteed value. But then the world expanded, and the rules were bent to accommodate it. In 1956, the interstate highway system ripped the industry wide open. Suddenly, a driver wasn't just going to the next county. They were crossing the continent. The federal government and massive freight companies faced a logistical nightmare. How do you regulate and verify pay for a man on a 3,000-mile haul? Hourly pay was deemed too difficult to track across state lines. So, the industry dug up an obscure labor loophole written back in the 1930s, the piece rate exemption, and adapted it into the modern per-mile rate. It was simple. It was easily measurable on an odometer. And to the drivers of 1956, it seemed perfectly equitable. That simple measurement worked. Until 1980, the government deregulated the entire trucking industry. Competition exploded overnight, and shipping rates violently collapsed. The per-mile rate was no longer a fair measurement. It became a weapon used by corporations to pass the cost of delays entirely onto the driver. In 1980, driving 2,500 miles a week bought a driver a solid middle-class life. There was buffer room. If they had to wait a couple of hours at a warehouse, they could absorb the hit. But because companies squeezed the rate down to the absolute floor, that exact same driver today has to run over 3,000 miles a week just to survive. That is the legal maximum a human being is allowed to drive. And this is where math becomes a physical trap. If you are legally capped on the hours you can work, and you must drive the absolute maximum just to pay your bills, what happens when a grocery warehouse makes you wait 6 hours in a parking lot for a forklift? You don't just lose time, you lose miles. Which means you are essentially paying for the privilege of waiting. That financial trap is brutal. But if you don't understand the hidden catch of this system, the entire modern food supply falls apart. Per-mile pay only compensates forward motion. If a driver sits at a warehouse loading dock for 6 hours while a crew unloads their trailer, they earn $0. If they are stuck in a 3-hour gridlock on the interstate, their paycheck completely halts. The system actively punishes everything that isn't a driven mile. Detours to weigh stations, mandatory federal rest breaks, and critically, cargo inspections. The entire global cold chain, the very reason you can buy fresh strawberries in the middle of winter, depends on drivers making unpaid stops to monitor the temperature of your food. They are the invisible quality control keeping our grocery store shelves safe and stocked. But every single minute they stand still to protect that cargo, they are bleeding their own money. Imagine hauling fresh strawberries from Salinas, California to Chicago. That is a 2,100-mile journey. At 55 cents a mile, the baseline math says you earn $1,155 for roughly 35 hours of driving. But that math is a lie. Add the 4-hour wait at the Salinas loading dock, unpaid. Add a 2-hour emergency refrigeration repair in Nevada, unpaid. Add the 3-hour line just to get through the gate in Chicago, unpaid. Suddenly, your real hourly rate just plummeted by 40%. And this is exactly where the food supply takes the hit. By the time those strawberries reach the warehouse, a percentage of them might have spoiled. Because the system forces the driver into an impossible choice. Pull over and monitor the cargo temperature for free, or keep driving just to pay your rent. Time is a currency they literally cannot afford to spend. We live in an era of impossible food abundance. Norwegian salmon, Mexican avocados, Peruvian blueberries in the dead of winter. Yet, this entire modern miracle rests on a compensation model designed when a truck's only job was moving flour to the next town. The driver is not just moving your dinner. They are making constant, invisible calculations. Every unpaid stop, every unchecked load. The system that feeds you is slowly consuming itself, 1 mile at a time. But this per-mile pay is just the financial side of the trap. Right now, an invisible digital rulebook dictates exactly when these drivers are allowed to sleep, turning highway off-ramps into tightly regulated legal prisons. If you want to see how this electronic tracking system forces drivers to break the law just to survive, click the video on your screen right now.